Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today's session. We're going to wait just another minute or two and let a few more folks hop on, so stay tuned. Thanks. We're going to wait just one more minute. So if you're patched in, we really appreciate your patience. We're going to just wait 1 or 2 more minutes for a few more folks to hop on. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I think we've got a good amount of people and some more folks can hop on. If our speakers want to hop in on their cameras too. And actually, if you want to stay off, that's okay too, but thought it'd be great to see all your faces. So those of you who are online, thank you so much for attending. This is our third and final installment of our grant application workshop series. My name is Jess Belomo. I am the Director of Entrepreneur Recruitment here at Arch Grants. So just so everybody knows, we are recording the session and we will make the recording available along with a PDF of the deck that you'll see today after the session concludes. So as long as you're registered, which all of you are, you will receive that later on. So let's go ahead and look at the agenda. So we're going to start off by, I will just give a quick rundown of what the startup competition at Arch Grants is all about, touch real briefly on some application best practices. Then I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed speakers, who I will introduce in just a second, who you see on camera right now. And they'll each have a little bit of time to talk through the specifics of supplementary documents and pitching in general, some tips and best practices that they can speak to from their own experiences. Then we're going to wrap it up with some interview Q&A time with our speakers, and also Laura Burkemper, who's here today, who's a longtime judge and supporter of Arch Grants. And then we will take questions from the audience. For any questions we do have time for, we'll try our best to get to them. If you do have any questions, then feel free to type them into that questions tab. So let me just quickly introduce today's speakers, and then if you guys want to, speakers, you're welcome to turn your camera back off until it's time for you to speak, but just wanted everybody to see your faces. So today we've got Emory Reignz from Grab My Bag is her company, and she is also a 2022 Arch Grants founder. So you can see her her bio here. She's got a really varied, wonderful background, and not only is she an amazing founder, but also can really speak strongly on pitching and presenting yourself as a professional actor. We also have Brett Calhoun, who's managing director and partner at Scale VC, located in Columbia, Missouri, not too far from us, doing a lot of great work supporting early stage founders and funding them as well. So we're going to have each of them talking specifically about how to pitch, have pitch decks, financial documents, executive summaries, and other supplementary documents that you will need to submit not only for the Arch Grants competition, but any other funding that you might be seeking will probably be equally helpful. So thank you, speakers, for showing your faces. So let me just kind of get the ball rolling here by just like making sure we're all on the same page and talking a little bit about exactly what we do at Arch Grants, what the startup competition is about, who's eligible, so that you can understand better if it's something that works for you and your company. And I'm just going to start off with a quick disclaimer that, you know, we're here to help and we love sharing best practices, but just so you know, there's no way that we can guarantee that following these rules is going to get you a grant. So we just hope that this session is helpful and applicable, not only if you choose to apply to our competition, but any others that you may be seeking. Just wanted to clarify that. So who is Arch Grants? Who are we? So we are a nonprofit entity. Our main mission, our why, is to transform St. Louis's economy by supporting and championing extraordinary entrepreneurs. We've been doing that since 2012, and in that time, we've awarded 230 companies with about 14 million in non-dilutive equity-free funding. And you can see here that that has, exponentially had an effect on how many jobs have been created in St. Louis and beyond, as well as revenue generated and follow-on capital. So the competition itself is an annual competition happening once a year, the window opening soon, which I'll touch on in a minute. We award approximately 20 up to 25 companies every year with $75,000 equity-free grants, and then an additional $25K if you're relocating from outside of Missouri or more than 150 miles away on the Illinois side. And you will also, in addition to that money, you get an array of support services we supply those to all of our early stage companies that we fund in a variety of ways that they need that support. And then also, since 2021, we've launched a growth grants program, which supplies follow-on funding for those who have gone through the program and agree to stay in St. Louis for additional time. So who are the applicants? Who are we looking for? How do you know if you're eligible? So first of all, we're looking for for-profit entities. We're looking for early stage companies, which we define as anywhere from a validated idea. So if you have some kind of market validation under your belt, up until pre-Series A. So if you've raised more than a few million, we consider you too far along. We're industry agnostic. We do have a kind of a special eye towards geospatial and agri-food tech entities, also founders who are veterans and founders who are from underrepresented groups. But anybody, any industry and any group, any demographic is welcome to apply. You do have to show that your idea is innovative. It's tech enabled, which means that you at least have an e-commerce platform. If you have a physical product, that's okay, as long as you have tech enabled in some way. And you have to show that you are scalable, potentially on at least a national level. And finally, you have to demonstrate and be willing to locate in St. Louis for at least a year. So what the program year entails, if you are to be awarded, in addition to the $75K that I've already mentioned in equity-free funding, or $100K if you're relocating, you receive an array of services. So that could mean professional support services. If you need legal help, accounting help, business help, we'll find those services for you. We have access to paid EIRs that you can sign up to have meetings with. We have a monthly founder circle, monthly founder socials, access to our very wide network of resources, and those who we know between staff and our board can be helpful to make connections. And then, like I mentioned, after you have completed your cohort year, you're eligible for an additional $100K in follow-on funding. So some general ways to prepare for your application, and we did cover this, some of this to a degree in our first workshop. And I'm sorry, I just realized that I said this is our third and final workshop. This is our second. This is our first and only virtual, our second workshop of 3. So in our first workshop, which was about a month ago, you can find a recording of that online on our YouTube channel. So some of this I already touched on then and went into greater detail then if this is of interest to you and you want to go in further detail. But here are some handy places where you can find some more resources to prepare for your application for us or for others. And again, like I mentioned, this will be made available to you after the session. I'll have a PDF of this, so these links will be clickable for you. So some of the topics that I mentioned that we covered in that first session on Terminology 101, if you are interested, that we won't go into details today, are listed here. And I think if you're curious about things like concept differentiation, being tech enabled, what scalability means, what market validation means, details on your legal structure or IP, what the difference is between revenue and capital raised and how you should reflect that, and a value proposition. Those are all items we covered in the last session. So this one, like I mentioned, we're going to really focus on those supplementary documents. So if this is of interest, please look at our last video that's posted. And then just some very general application best practices that I'm going to end here and then kick it over to Emory to talk about pitching and pitch decks and all of the art that goes around that. So just some general advice here. Make sure with our application, it is a pretty meaty application. It's not just a copy paste sort of thing. Please give yourself plenty of time. The window is pretty lengthy. And I will mention that the actual window here in just a second, but just make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time and aren't waiting till the 11th hour. And then as far as representing your team goes, just please note that we do require that a founder fill out the application. So make sure that it is a founder doing that. We do ask for founder educational background info, but just note that that is only for our own internal records. That is not shared with the judges. And it doesn't matter what your educational background is. It's only for data tracking purposes. We do have a place to mention advisors versus co-founders versus team members. So just make sure that you're clarifying that and putting those in the right places. And then finally, we get a lot of questions on the founder location requirement, since it is a requirement that you have a presence in St. Louis if you are to be awarded our funding. So our rule is at least one founder, and 51% of operations needs to be in St. Louis during your cohort year if you're awarded, or 51% of founders and any kind of operations. So just if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out and we can tell you more about that. And then the final couple of points, in our case, we do ask about St. Louis and why St. Louis and why is your company a good fit. So if you are applying to our particular competition, just keep in mind that you should personalize it and be honest, but not hokey. And talking, we're looking for where do you fit in the ecosystem? Why are you and why is your company and your idea a good fit? We're not expecting you to argue that you're going to fix St. Louis all by yourself. We're more looking at where do you fit and why is it a good fit for you and your company to be located here. And then finally, just a note on quality control when it comes to filling out our application. Please be as thorough as you can, as the wording limitations allow. And some questions might feel redundant, but we are asking them for a reason. So just make sure that you're being mindful as you're filling those out. I'll go ahead and skip that. So as I mentioned, here's the layout of our timeline. And the big thing here to note is our application window is opening soon, February 21st. It will be open until March 31st. So we go through quite a robust process after that, as you can see, and our cohort year will begin in early October and go to the following October. So with that, I will go ahead and stop talking and I'll turn it over to Emory to tell us about pitching.
Oh, wow, no pressure. Okay, give me 1 second up first. All right, let me just grab, not my bag, just my pitch. I'm gonna come on camera. Thanks, guys. Bear with me about 30 seconds.
Yeah, we understand.
All right, let's pitch. So hi, my name is Emory Reignz. I'm the CEO and founder of Grab My Bag, which is a luggage delivery service from airport baggage claim to the traveler's requested location. I am also very proudly an Arch Grants founder from the 2022 cohort. Next slide. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about what a pitch deck is. And some of you may know what it is already, which is wonderful, but hopefully I'll be able to give you a couple of tips for the Arch Grants process since I just went through it, and that'll be helpful. How do you make a pitch deck? And I think more specifically, it's not just about how do you make a pitch deck, but how do you make a pitch deck specifically for the people that you're pitching, right? So in this case, you're going to be pitching Arch Grants, hopefully. So I want to help out with that if I can. What should your pitch deck include? I think that it's important to kind of have a baseline because sometimes the information can just be overwhelming. And especially if your company is a little more in the weeds, you want to make sure that you're keeping it general enough that people understand, but specific enough so that it looks like you know your product, your service, your company well. And then just a few resources that I have found helpful along my journey that I want to share with you guys. Next slide, please. So I am big on quotes. I think that, cliche they might be, they definitely mean something. So Walt Disney said the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. So you'll often hear me say, if you're in my world, I always say, don't talk about it, be about it, right? So let's be about it. Let's get pitching. Next slide. What is a pitch deck? The ins and outs. So you'll notice that I changed the definition slightly. So a pitch deck is a presentation that helps people learn more about your business. And I selected people instead of the word investors because investors are people. And I think that as entrepreneurs, sometimes we forget that fact. They want your deck to take them down a path, right? And that path needs to tell the who, what, when, where, why, and how of your business, just like a story. So your business is a story. It's the story of you. It's the story of your product or your service. So who is your business, product, or service for? That's your market. What is your business? That's your business concept. Why is it important? That's going to be the problem that your business solves. When will your business start making money, and how will your business make money, right? This is going to be very important to the people that you're asking to give you money, because they're going to want to know when they're getting their money back, right? And if you have a plan in place for that to happen. This tells them how they will make their money back, and also how they can support you, because you may not have all of this figured out yet, but that also gives them an idea within your deck what they need to do. So that's going to be through telling them about your revenue streams, your projections, your margins that are built into your price points and your pricing. Where you are with your business at this point is something also that you're going to want to share, and that's going to be your traction. Is it an idea? Are you already in market? Are you getting ready to go to market? All of those things matter, right? And then the why. The why is, under what circumstances would people use your business, right? That's your solution to the problem. So you want to offer that specifically and identify it so that they know, here's the problem, I am the solution. You need, what I believe is, a story that captivates the people reading it and listening to your pitch. And that's your job as an entrepreneur, to create that within your pitch that you're presenting. It should definitely be pitched and presented in an organized manner that makes sense and tells a story about your business. And it should be clearly and concisely defined, and anyone that's looking at it can identify those points that we just talked about. Next slide, please. So how do you make a pitch deck? Okay, now what? So now you know what it should have. Let's talk about kind of the meat and potatoes almost. We're almost there. So let's go in. Next slide, please. So what I say is, when you're getting started, don't reinvent the wheel, right? Or the pitch deck wheel in this case. Google is your friend. If you go to Google and you take a look, there's a lot of deck templates out there. There's a lot of information out there that can show you at least how to start, right? I say that you build your deck around your personality, right? It's going to be your brand's personality around you. You want to update that template that you find accordingly. You can build it out from scratch if you want, and if you think that that's the best use of your time, but I don't think it is, because especially during this application process, you are going to have a lot that you have to put into it, and you shouldn't be putting extra work on yourself. So go find a template that speaks to you. There's plenty of places, plenty of resources that you can find it, and start altering it. Alter it to your brand's colors or your brand's story. Do your research, right? And find a company that has this information and that has a variety to choose from that's worth spending on, right? You might have to spend a little money, but there are a lot of free resources out there. So I'm always about finding the free stuff before you go paying for anything. So my background is in entertainment. So I like to tell people to start their pitch decks with a photo, just a simple photo that explains a story, that tells a story, right? That's captivating. You're going to be the one that's speaking over this photo, right? You want to elicit an emotional response from people, because again, investors are people, right? So you want to tell the story either of your business or of the people that your business is serving. Tell a story, captivate us, elicit an emotional response, and get people's attention. This is only needs to be about 30 to 45 seconds. You don't need to put a whole lot of time into it. You just need to put some thought into it. Don't worry about getting it right or getting it wrong, whatever pitch deck you pick. I promise you that everyone is going to tell you you're right and everyone is going to tell you you're wrong. But if you can't create your pitch deck based off of that, you're going to have to create your pitch deck based off of you and based off the fundamentals of your business and what makes you stick out and what makes it the strongest. If you go into it trying to please any organization or investor or person or entity, it's going to feel really overwhelming, and you're not going to feel like you're honed in on what you want to be talking about, which is your business. And at the end of the day, it's about you. And then be organized, structured, again, concise, and use visuals, right? Use charts, use tables, use pie charts, use graphs, use the dog, the picture of the family dog, whatever you have to use that is going to help, again, elicit a response and help people to see what's happening as opposed to reading it, right? So any visuals that you have that can tell a story, but be balanced. You don't want just a whole bunch of pictures on the page and no writing, right? But you don't want a whole lot of writing on the page and no pictures, because at the end of the day, you want people to be focused on you, right? So be like Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off. So for everything you add into your deck, you might have to take something out. So remember that when you're putting your deck together. If you have a lot of words on the screen, as you're talking, people are going to be reading the words and they might miss what you're saying. And what you're saying is the most important part, because again, this is your business. This is your time to shine. You're in front of the right people. So you want to make sure that they're focused on you. Next slide, please. So what should my pitch deck include? So now we're in the meat and potatoes. Next slide. All right, so I call this the 10 pitch deck commandments, right? These are the items that you definitely want to have in your pitch deck. Your pitch deck is going to be about 12 to 15 slides. It could be a little longer if you have longer to pitch, but in general, this is about how long it's going to be. The reason I know you see 10 and you're like, wait, 12 to 15, because you definitely need a cover page and you definitely need a contact page. Contact us, contact me, whatever you might be, whatever stage your business is in. So that puts you in that 12 range. You want to make sure that you have an introduction, that you identify the problem, that you identify the solution, that you identify your target market, that you identify any traction you've made, that you identify the marketing and sales strategy for your business, identify the competition that you have, identify the team that you have, your financials, and then your ask, right? So let me go into this a little more kind of one by one now that I've talked about it. So your introduction should be 30 to 45 seconds. As I said, photo, story, what's happening in the photo, tell the story, tell your business, talk about it, right? And maybe it's a photo and story of you, right? How your business came to be. Maybe it's a photo and story of your customer persona, right? Whatever it might be, photo, story, 30 to 45 seconds. Your problem should be clearly and concisely defined. You need to state the problem that is happening surrounding your business, that your business is solving, who it is, and then you want to beef up this portion with some stats, right? You want to have all of the stats you can have. Again, maybe nice visually put, right? But you want to have those stats not only just for your deck, but in your back pocket, because when they start asking you about questions related to your business, the more statistics you can speak about, the more prepared it shows that you are and that you know your industry. So you want to have stats for investors. They like numbers, right? I think so. Brett will have to tell you that. Maybe that's not true. Your solution. You want to make sure that you clearly describe what you do and how it solves the problem that you just presented, right? So you told the story, you presented a problem. Now you're going to talk about your solution to it. Your target market. You need to be able to tell us who will buy your product, your service, whatever it is, once it's available. And again, you should use stats, right? So if you've already started testing your markets and you've got a few sales, then talk about that. Don't be ashamed of the sales that you have. If you don't have any sales, that's okay too. The research and the statistics that you have will support your product idea service, okay? You want to, and that helps you to also support your hypothesis on it, right? Traction. So traction is what's happened with your business from the time you started it to now, right? That's your traction. So you want to make sure you identify that. Don't be modest, right? Tell all of the things that you did. If you won, best in 10 at, your school competition, then put that in there. If you won, at the family reunion, tell that too, right? It doesn't matter. Whatever traction you've had, that's your story. So be proud of it, state your traction, tell what you're doing, and tell what you plan on doing. Have you started testing? Have you built a prototype? Have you sold it in market test yet? Did you win an accelerator? Whatever you've done that helps support your business, you need to tell them. Marketing and sales strategy. How are you planning on selling your product or service? It's not just saying, I'm going to market to people. I'm going to put up Facebook ads. I'm going to fill in the blank. You need to really think about it. Like how? Really drill down and ask yourself how you find out about new products or services and what made you buy them, right? And then think about yourself in your customer's shoes. If you were your customer, what would it take for you to see to buy your product, right? That's how you're going to be able to find who wants to purchase your product or service. Competition. Your competition are your competitors within your market. You've got indirect competition and you've got direct competition. If you think that you're the only you're probably not. So there is a concept of being individual, right? And you can possibly be in a realm of your own, but there's someone that is similar to what you're doing. So if you are the only you, or you find that you can't find anybody else, then find someone that's similar and use them as an indirect competitor, because it's not going to fly to get up in front of a room full of 40 or 50 judges and tell them that you have no competition. They're not going to believe you and they're not going to take you serious about your business. So find out who your competitor is, find out why they're a competitor. What are they doing? What are they offering? Do they have better pricing than you? Do they have a better product? Is their service quicker? Identify what's special about you that makes you stand out as opposed to the competitors. And when you do that, identify it in like a chart, right? Like a table where you can have either check marks or X's, or maybe you have your logo that shows we do this and they don't. Your team, who is your team? What do they bring to the table? If it's just you, that's okay. Guess what? I'm a solo founder and I'm enough. You are enough. So that's the first thing you have to remember. Don't worry about the people you're going up against. We're all on level playing field. Everyone is getting the same amount of energy and time put into them. This is about you. So build it up, show who you are, show what your background is. Tell about your credentials and about you. It's okay to be the only person on your team. If you've got other people on your team, make sure you're highlighting the strongest parts about them that help to highlight your business, that people can say, oh, wow, we didn't know that Johnny had, a PhD math person on his math company team, whatever it might be, right? You want to make sure that you're bringing out their honors and their accolades to help support and strengthen your application. Financials, the numbers matter, okay? You have to be able to articulate what your money is, how you're going to make it, what your revenue streams are, all of that. The numbers just matter. It's okay if you're not good at Excel, you can't put together spreadsheets. Again, Google is your friend, right? There are templates online, but you can't just go and get a template and put numbers in and think that it's going to get you through. You have to be able to defend it. And if you have to just put together something very simple that says, my plan is to have 100 sales in the month of June and I sell at $30 a piece, I'm going to make $3,000. That's okay too. Just be able to tell what your financials are, to defend them, and to show that you understand that this is a business and that you are potentially getting between $75,000 and $100,000, and that you can be trusted as a good good steward of that money. Your ask, how much do you need, right? I think people forget that in the ask. So in this case, obviously Arch Grants knows how much they're going to be giving you, either $75,000 or $100,000, but you should identify it still. It's a good habit to get in the habit of. You don't want to forget your ask, because people need to know not only how much you're asking for, but what you plan to do with that money. And this is the important part of it. Don't ask for $1 million and not have a strong accounting for every dollar and documents to back up what that $1 million is going to do, right? You need to be able to say every dollar is being spent this way. That's what people want to see. Also, the other thing that you have to remember is that when you're pitching for any amount of money, you don't want to just identify, I'm going to hire people, because that's an expense, right? What does hiring those people do to help your business, right? How does that help to generate money? So people don't want to hear you're going to spend their money, right? They know you're going to spend their money. They want to hear how spending the money is going to help you make money and in return get them their money back, or in Arch Grants' case, help to build a city, right? So that's important to remember as well. Next slide, please. So finally, we've got some resources to help just to fuel your tank a little bit. I know it was quick and probably overwhelming. So there are a lot of resources to help. Next slide. So one of the resources is a company called StartCo. They have a founder's kit tool that's available. You guys will get these slides after, but you can go to that link and they have a lot of information, everything from a business plan to how to pitch investors, right? So go in there, read that information. It is free, so it won't cost you anything to do. And also Arch Grants has a business resources page that is absolutely amazing. It gives you a lot of information. Yes, you'll have the link here, but you should go and check out the site, because I think any accelerator that you're applying to, you need to make sure that they're a good fit for you, just like they're making sure that you're a good fit for them, right? So you should never just be applying to an accelerator or applying for money when you don't know anything about the organization. So I'm not going to tell you where this link is, even though you're going to get it in the slides, because I encourage you to go to the Arch Grants website and click through and look at what Arch Grants has to offer, what they've done for founders, and make sure they're a good fit for you, because they want to support you. And the last one that people don't go to anymore, I don't think, is your library, your local library. The librarians are there to help. They want to help you. They're excited about projects, about new businesses. They will help you. So if you have no idea where to start, go into that library, go to a librarian, go to someone at the help desk, tell them what you need, and they will help you. Next slide, please. So good luck. Again, my name is Emory Reignz. I want to thank Arch Grants for having me today. And my shameless plug is book a grab next time you travel and tell your friends. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much, Emory. And yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be an excellent startup founder if you didn't plug when it was time to plug. So I appreciate that. No, thank you so much. Yeah, great advice. Appreciate you. Okay, we will now turn it over to Mr. Brett Calhoun. He's going to tell us a little bit more about financial statements and executive summaries. And I'm sure you have a lot to say, so please take it away and I'll take care of the slides.
Thanks, Jess. Emory, phenomenal job there. And to answer your question about, do investors care about the numbers? I think they're starting to care about the numbers again. Ever since the change in the market, there was probably a 3-year period where everybody was like, we don't really care about cash flow, until everybody realized that a lot of businesses are valued based upon their cash flows. So yeah, I'm gonna run through executive summaries and financial statements, try to keep it as high level as possible, as intuitive as possible, because I know this can definitely be a dry topic. And bear with me if I sneeze or cough. I am dealing with a terrible head cold at the moment. Before we get started, quick. So I run Scale. We're a fund based out of Columbia, Missouri. We invest idea to pre-seed stage in founders building across North America. And we, for a 3-month period, we like to surround them with operators that have built multi-billion-dollar companies. So we do a lot more than just be capital partners. We're also long-term supporters and hustle alongside you. Now, if we could start with the where to begin slide. All right, so I'm going to try to go through a series of questions and kind of explain the why behind some of these, so that you understand on a deeper level how you should be thinking about, before you even start writing an executive summary or a pitch deck or building your financial model, like what is some of the questions you should be asking yourself? Because once you write your executive summary, you want to get to a point where you give that summary to an investor, and it's like, at the end of it, they're going to think, why do we even need to write an investment memo? Because they've already done all the work for us. So starting, like, what is your unique insight? Wedge into the market? This is, softball question, but it's something that you need to think deeply about. Why are you different than all the competitors out there? How are you going to get into this massive market and then go from this small niche problem to the next? Two, why is this a burning and massive problem? Why now? This is probably what is most important. You want to articulate this in the least amount of words and as simple as possible that everybody can understand, like, that makes sense. You understand what the customer's problem is and why now is the right time. And I can give some examples of a recent company that we're investing in. They do synthetic data generation, and for companies, for example, that Archery does a bunch with geospatial analytics. For companies trying to collect data for geospatial analytics for AI models, it takes a lot of time and you have to deploy hardware for that. And so it's really expensive. And then once you get the data, you have to label it. So say you have 1 million data points, somebody has to manually go in and label that. So if you could build a platform that has synthetic data generation, that can streamline all this process. But why now? China has quickly surpassed the US with collecting AI data. And so it's pressuring the US. So it's like literally the perfect timing for a company like that. It's like, that's a good why now. What do you believe that no one else does about the market? I think this is super important because I think each founder is probably going to have some contrarian view about why they're building what they're building, as opposed to saying, hey, we're just the next copycat enterprise SaaS platform. So like, why are you thinking about this different? What is your insight? Next is like, what is your 10-year vision? How does this get massive? Most investors, now this is generally speaking, some don't, but what most think is like, this is a 10-year relationship. Why is your company going to get massive? So you might have this niche market now, like if you're Airbnb, it's like you're trying to go out and raise funding, and every investor is like, well, we're not going to invest in this because nobody's going to share their home. But like, from your perspective, you're like, everybody in the world is going to share their home. Or if you're Carta, you're like, we're going to have the best cap table management ever. Nobody would invest in their company in the early days because they're like, a cap table management platform can't be huge, but it's okay. Carta now owns like everything in the like legal venture space. Next, what is the output of your solution? So I think what a lot of people get hung up on is like, this is my product, these are my features, this is what it does. No, it's like, what is the output for the customer? So what is the ROI that I experience from your product? Not what do I do with your product? How does your product change my life, change my experience, my workflow? Next, why you're different. This is kind of redundant. Who's your ICP and why? ICP means ideal customer profile. So as opposed to going in and saying, I am serving everybody in the construction space. It's like, no, who is the actual person you're serving in that space? Like, narrow it down, even if it's like super small, because there's going to be somebody on a smaller niche level that has a burning problem more than the general population. But you want to prove out your product with those people so that then the general population understands like, wow, this product is useful. Next, what have you learned from your customers? How has that influenced your product? And, before you ever write an executive summary, you're going to have done, and if you haven't, you probably should go back and do this, go through an extensive customer discovery process. And there's not like a magic number, like you need to interview 10 people or 100 people or 200, but you need to go talk to as many customers as you can and collect as much data as you can from listening to what they're saying, not selling them on a vision. And eventually, most of the time, your product will evolve based upon your customer discovery, assuming that your hypothesis isn't 100% correct as you go out to do customer discovery. Next, what risks have you mitigated? What will you mitigate over the next 18 to 24 months? So this is super important when you're looking at going out and raising money, because investors are always looking for ways to de-risk their investment. And from the earliest stages, obviously, it's the riskiest asset class you can possibly get into. Well, maybe not anymore with crypto the way it is, but generally it's the riskiest asset class you can get into. And so if you can go and show, hey, unlike almost no money, bootstrap money, or friends and family money, we were able to accomplish this and learn this, and it set us up to do this over the next 18 to 24 months. And if you give me $1 million, I'm going to accomplish XYZ. Like these are the KPIs, key performance indicators. We're going to hit 1,000 customers, whatever. How has the user experience improved from your solution? So this kind of went into what I was talking about earlier, but I always like showing, this was the old workflow for the customer to accomplish whatever it is they're accomplishing or doing whatever they're doing. And now enter my product, and this is what the workflow is now, and this is how it completely changes your life. How does this scale? Super important. At the beginning stages, everyone's like, oh, we don't need to make a financial model, like finances are silly. Like at the early stages, we're pre-revenue. It's like, no, a good example would be, hey, I'm building software for small businesses. Okay. Well, you can't charge small businesses a lot of money because they don't have a lot of money. But my software is going to add a lot of value to them. They just don't have a high propensity to pay. But if you look on, the next 3 or 4 years, what it's going to cost to acquire each one of those very fragmented small businesses, it might cost more to acquire each one than it does what they're actually paying you per month. That business doesn't scale. You got to start over. Next, why do you have the right team? Obviously, this is super important, especially the early stages. I mean, 80-90% of the weight of our investments goes into who is the team, why is this going to drive the company. You want to invest in the jockey, not the horse, is the saying. And this could mean like you have domain experience, you've experienced the problem, there's some personal connection to it that you're passionate about. You have the technical skills in your team, but you want to be able to articulate like, why do we have what it takes to win? And then the last thing is like, why won't you win? So like understand your weaknesses and be able to articulate those, say, hey, like, we're really bad at this, but we know we're really bad at this, and this is what we're going to do to try to mitigate that in the future. Can we go to the next one? Now, going into actually writing a summary. So I think this is a good quote to start with. A good writer will almost always discover new things in the process of writing. Writing doesn't just communicate ideas, it generates them. And even though it might seem like I don't have enough time to write an executive summary, I'm a founder, I have too much to do, it's really good to do this exercise because you will discover things in the process of actually writing it. And it will also enhance your ability to articulate what you're doing and force you to think through some of the things and maybe even challenge yourself on some of your hypotheses with your company. And I would probably start with writing the summary kind of hand in hand with the deck before you do the financial model, because a lot of the things that you do in the summary will answer questions in your financial model. And with that said, I would do everything you can to use as little words and simplify the summary as much as possible, because less words always goes further than more. Now, can we go to starting on the financial planning? So now going into financial planning. So the first question, in which we already talked about a second ago, is who's your ideal customer profile? And the reason I say that is because when you go to do your financial plan, it's not just revenue and expenses. There's so much more to it. There are drivers that are driving that revenue and expenses. Who your ideal customer is going to drive how you go to market. How do you sell to them? The product that you end up building. So like, what do you need to launch your solution? Well, maybe based upon this new ideal customer profile from customer discovery, you could start with a much lower minimum viable product and you go to market much sooner than you thought. How will you reach and close your customer? So do you need to do outbound or inbound marketing? Is it going to be organic through Google? Do we need to invest in SEO? This is all going to drive the expenses in your model. What will they pay now and how? Obviously, that's very important, how you understand your pricing. There's some of an art and a science to pricing products, and a lot of it will just come through talking to customers and trying to understand their propensity to pay. But you probably won't really ever know what the true price is until you go down the road. And there's many successful companies that literally just throw a dart at the wall and say, we're going to charge $100. And then, they're very successful charging that price. What are your CAC, LTV, and ACV? So we spoke about this a second ago. CAC stands for customer acquisition cost. So every time you acquire a customer, so it's all your marketing and sales spend, lifetime value, and average order. I meant to put an AOV, average order value. is going to be very important for understanding how your business scales over time. Do my margins, my CAC to LTV improve over time? How will you manage product and sales? That kind of goes with your operations. Like as a founder, can you run lean for a while? Do you have to hire VPs? It's important with trying to understand your hiring path. How do you retain and upsell? This is just adding, your product roadmap for your product. What are your expected costs for the prior steps? How do you operate as lean as possible? I would always have a couple different plans, and it's not a bad thing to try to run as lean as possible because it forces you to operate under constraints and be financially savvy for a little while. And I think a good quote by Wade Foster, the founder of Zapier, is he said he would only ever hire when it hurts. And I think that's like a good thing to gauge on. They took 1.4 million in venture dollars and turned that into they do over 250 million in ARR now, and they're a top 25 Y Combinator company. Next, how will you finance your costs? And everything prior to this is going to determine how you do that. I mean, maybe you go through all this process and you're like, you know what, we actually should go get bank financing. We're not a venture backable company. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of companies that are that are not venture backable that are great companies. Can we go next slide? So now getting into the actual model, and I'm going to try to keep this as high level as possible because accounting and finance are super boring, even though I was a CPA and I've done accounting and finance in my career. So the income statement, that is your driver. That is like the lifeblood of your company. Like I'm receiving X money from my customers. I'm spending X money to get that X dollars. So what you really want to understand is like how much it's costing you for every dollar of revenue. Balance sheet is just a health check. It's just kind of making sure all the numbers are tying together. This really doesn't typically matter too much for early stage companies. The only time it starts really mattering is when you have a lot of debt on the balance sheet. And last, cash flow statement. This is what's most important because if you start having negative cash for too long, obviously you're going to die. And this is a metric that a lot of investors over the last few years haven't really cared to track. But this is going to determine how much money you need to raise and if you're going to be able to stay in business for whatever months. Next slide. So kind of going into the model really quick, and I know, let me see what time it is. We're way over time here. So drivers, this is how I built models, and I can share with all of you a link for a model that I've built that's pretty intuitive for any founders to kind of go in and tweak and try to create their own plan. But you're going to have very granular drivers like, what is my weekly growth in traffic? What is my conversion rate going to be? What is my churn going to be? What is my pricing model? Who do I need to hire? Do I have a cost of revenue? What are my R&D expenses? And this will drive the output of the 3 financial statements. I think we got 2 more slides left really quick here. So then the output results are your financial statements, and how I typically tell founders to model their finances at the early stages is like, you don't necessarily need a 5-year statement. Now, maybe you do for certain applications or for certain investors, but what's really important is what's going to happen over the next 18 to 24 months, and what are you going to do with that money? And are you going to be cash flow positive in 18 to 24 months? And if not, what is your plan with raising future financing? And instead of thinking more pie in the sky, this is what we're going to do in 5 years, and this is the margins are going to be. Okay, last slide. And to sum this up, I mean, these are just some different output results and how I think about using a model and what's important. And like I already said, your 2-month revenue projection, 2-month cash flow from operations, your customer acquisition to average order value. You want to make sure that's scaling over time. And this is more focused towards SaaS companies. So if you're a hardware company, I'm really sorry. But that said, I think once it's really dumbed down, finances are super easy for founders, and they've been made hard for many years. Just like legal things, you try to read legal documents, there's a lot of big words in there, and just so that it takes longer to do certain legal work. But on service level accounting is actually really easy. And it shouldn't be hard for you as founders. So I hope this helped add value to some of you. If not, I'm sorry, but feel free to share my email, Jess, and I'm happy to be helpful after this call too.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Brett. And thanks for forcing your voice. I can tell that that was rough on your throat. I'm sorry for making you talk so much. But yeah, I think that was super useful and so much, but also succinct at the same time. There's just a lot to talk about. So appreciate you for sharing all this. So, okay, we do have about 10 minutes for some chit chat here. So let me stop sharing my screen. Well, actually first, let me just sort of have this here so you can see again, everybody's names and titles. And Laura, if you want to just briefly introduce yourself and tell us who you are other than a rockstar Arch Grants volunteer judge. And then I've got a few questions and we might have some questions from the audience too, if there's time. Oh, you're muted.
Thanks, Jess. Can't beat that kind of intro. So I'll really just kind of talk about from a judge standpoint. I've been part of Arch Grants since 2012 when it started as a judge and mentor to a lot of companies. And what I do at the Catalyst Center is position companies for investment, scale, and sale by building their brand and helping them build out their pitch deck. And so really, Emory and Brett, you've just given a wealth of knowledge to the attendees, and to all the attendees, thank you for being here because you're one step ahead of all of the other competition. In Arch Grants, I can't say enough great things about how it gives you a great platform in which to grow your business. And so with all this good information, I think, the next step is how do you put it to good use? And so if anybody has some questions, I think between all of us, we're here to help answer those. Between Emory, Brett, and myself.
Appreciate that. Yeah, and so while we see if there's any questions from the audience, I do have a few of my own. And just kind of want to start in that world of judging, although I'm sure that all three of you will have some input here. So how would you, and Laura, if you want to start, how would you recommend handling tough questions from judges? And do you have any specific examples? And then this question, want Brett and Emory to also chime in, either your experience applying or your experience as a judge or both. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a perfect question to start with. So when you get up and you're presenting and you get a tough question you're not sure what to do about, the first thing I'd recommend is honesty, right? Honesty and transparency. So if you don't know the answer to that, there's a lot of ways to handle this question. One is to say, that's a great question. Let me get back to you. Can I get your name after the Q&A? Another way to handle that is, when you get tough questions, is to tag on to what Emory presented to you, is add an appendix to your pitch deck. And in that appendix, have things that normally are a little bit tougher to answer. What you really want to do, as Emory said in your pitch deck, is get your story out there, make it easy, understandable. And then once you get to the Q&A, you start to figure out, is that really a worthwhile question? And so then you start to build your appendix, because that might be a more robust answer to a more strategic investor in the room. And so by having that, you look really smart. It's like, oh, let me point right to that. And you build your pitch deck to answer some of those more in-depth questions. And so those are a couple things. I'll pass it over to my cohorts to answer as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in from the founder perspective. I would say the first thing is to take a deep breath, right? Because you're gonna feel overwhelmed if someone throws a question at you that you weren't expecting. And after you take a breath, then go to the stats, right? Try to think about something about your business that there is an answer to that question in it. Right. So if you can link back to something that you've presented, like Laura was saying, and you have an appendix to say, oh, well, I have something similar to that. And then you advise them about what you do know, and then say, that's definitely an area that, we'll look into more. We hadn't thought about it. Right. You can always try to sandwich it, right? So breathe, put something in there that you've already given and that relates to it. And then if it's something that you honestly hadn't thought about, be human and say you hadn't thought about it and say, but I really think that could strengthen my business, and always thank them for the question. You're going to only have a certain amount of time to answer. So don't waste your time on questions that you don't know. Give what you know and then move on, because it gives you more of an opportunity to be asked questions by other judges in the room and to shine a little bit more. You have to remember that, keep it clear, keep it concise, unlike I'm doing right now. Okay, I'll pass it to Brett.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with both of you. I think also it's somewhat of a case by case basis, because there's going to be some questions you're just not going to know, and at that point you just have to have a level of humility and be like, yeah, I don't know the answer to that. There's going to be some questions though, if you don't answer, it's going to be like, you know, like red flags, like this person hasn't done their homework, and so you got to be quick on your feet, come up with a creative response. And so, yeah, I mean, I would definitely, yeah, it's a case by case basis. It's hard with investors. I would say, like, there's some companies that with job interviews, they'll actually have you do projects or ask you questions that literally don't have a right answer, just because they want to see how you respond to that. And they want to see like what your level of like humility is, like, yeah, I just don't know this. Instead of being like trying to know everything, and being somewhat coachable is a good thing, but it is a bit of a different relationship with investors. So it's trying to toe the line of like when to do that and when to not.
Yeah, all good points for sure. And there was sort of a follow-on question that just came in that I think you could address for us pretty quickly. Somebody was asking specific to sources. So like sources for their data, should they put sources in the appendix? Is that a good place to put sources? Or how do you recommend handling that? Like citing your sources in your pitch deck?
Yeah, a lot of times on like your total addressable market and where you get some of your stats from, even if you have it sourced on that slide, you know, Statista is a great, reliable resource. So the asterisk Statista, and then I could recommend in your pitch deck down below in your speaker notes, you could actually have the hyperlink to that. So if anybody questions, hey, I don't know about that number, you can at least reference where you get it. And so they might question the number, but not the reference. And so that's one way to help address references. And if it's more robust, you can always put that in the appendix to a list of resources.
Sure, that makes sense. Thank you, Laura. Another question from me. What's a common mistake that you've seen or that you've done in an application or in a pitch or in seeing financials? What's the most common mistake that you've seen or has tripped you up yourself?
I think that I'll cop to it early on in my pitching days, was what Brett was saying, where you kind of say, everybody wants this, and they don't want to hear that. Everybody may want it, and you may truly believe everyone wants it, but you have to identify who your market is. So I think that's something that trips people up in decks a lot, is just thinking that, you know, every Black person will buy my hair product, or, you know, every kid is going to love these cookies that we bake, right? That's not what's going to happen. So you want to be sure that you have statistics to identify who wants what you've got.
And any other thoughts? Go ahead.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, sure. So have you noticed any like really common mistakes? Like what's the most common mistake that you see like applicants being tripped up by, either in financials or in general when they're pitching?
With decks, I would say they're just way too long. There's too many words. If you're sending a deck to an investor, a lot of times they might just open it on their phone. They might be getting into an Uber, you know, whatever, but you got like 30 seconds, like first couple slides, or you're done. With pitches, I would say we don't do like a whole lot of myself. It's more about how does this person articulate their story, as opposed to like a full out presentation. So we definitely try to assess people on how detailed they're thinking about the customer. That's really important to us. And as opposed to going, if let's say you've got 12 slides or 20 slides and you go 8 slides deep into the problem, that's a bit overkill. I know a lot of investors try to stay away from that. So yeah, just like being articulative and as simple as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Does the story make sense, right? Does it logically make sense? And also, when you're building out that story, think about some of the mistakes I've seen is the product market fit. What's the problem and what's the solution? And do those match up, right? So making sure there's the product market fit, and that from the visual standpoint, just to punctuate what Brett said, is, are you competing with your slides? So does your, do you have so many words that are you reading, or are you listening to the presenter, right? Or a little of both. And the last thing is, does the see match the say? So does the visual match what you're talking about? If I'm talking all about baseball, then why do I have a football slide up, right? So does your visual match the content you're talking about? Just a couple extra tips and tricks on your pitch deck.
Yeah, and I think those are all spot on. Yeah, appreciate all of that. We're already out of time. I had several more questions, but you guys just had so much good stuff. So I think this is wonderful. I do see a couple questions from attendees that I just want to touch on real quick that are about being a full-time founder versus a part-time founder. For Arch Grants in particular, we require that if you are to be an awardee, that you have at least one full-time founder. You don't have to be full-time when you apply, but you have to plan to be full-time once you are awarded, if you are to be awarded. So that's how our particular competition works. If Laura or Brett, if you have any final thoughts on outside of Arch Grants, the judge's perspective on full-time versus part-time founders, I think we can wrap it up after that.
We don't, at least at scale, we don't require founders to be full-time. I think everybody's journey is different, and we do like really early stage investing, which is part of the reason for this. So they might be idea stage. You might still, it might not even be a full-time job yet. Like you're still in this like customer discovery phase. So it's not a requirement for us. Obviously, at some quick point in the future, we would hope that you were going to be full-time on your job. And I think that's very important. It's also a strong signal to investors that, you're really passionate about what you're doing. So I think there's like a small window where it's okay, but outside that, it's, yeah.
Sure. Laura, anything to add to that, or do you concur?
Yeah, I agree with, depends on what stage you're in, right? I think Brett said it best, depends on what stage you're in. And so usually we're seeing things a little bit more further along. So if somebody is full-time. And so you have to figure out the crawl, walk, run for your business. And does that story logically make sense for the time, money, resources you have? So I would answer it very similarly.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. Okay, here, I'm just gonna share my screen real quick one more time. First of all, thank you, all three of you. Yeah, I thought you had great advice, great tips. Hopefully everybody else finds them helpful. So just wanted to wrap it up by reminding everybody that it is the season. If you do want to apply for the Arch Grant Startup Competition, the window opens soon, February 21st, closes March 31st. If you would like to subscribe to get notifications on and reminders on that, here is the link that you will also receive via PDF later on. And we do have one more workshop that will be next month that you will get an invite to if you're on that list, that is live and in person. So please do reach out, contact the competition email if you have questions about the startup competition, or if we weren't able to get to your question today and you would like it answered, feel free to follow up, and I'm happy to get you all the answers I can. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. Presenters, appreciate you so much. And thank you all for staying tuned for this hour. Have a good one. Thank you all.